Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada, like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on Sport.
Welcome to hour number 2, live right here on this Wednesday on the Early Line on SportsGrid. He is Donnie, I am Ben. It is Combine Week in Indianapolis, but the guys aren't even working out yet. They're barely taking measurements in Indy. It is also an important week, not just for the prospects looking to take that next leap into the National Football League, but because all of the National Football League convenes in one place. They all get together, and every burning question you have for these clubs about their offseason plans, their expectations for the upcoming year, can be answered in one spot. And DRS, we have so many headlines and storylines and sound bites to go through and react to here to start off this second hour.
Yeah, fantastic. We love the Combine, heating it up. It's like the new year has started in the NFL. So many exciting things will happen over the next couple months, which doesn't really include the Combine. I like free agency much more. I like the draft process much more than this. I just don't like the Combine. Let's all work out. But if you are one of the prospects, you do get to show up. You get a nice little hoodie. You probably get a nice pair of shorts. And, you can go home and say, hey, buddy, look, I went to the Combine back in 2025.
Some great swag, no doubt about it. You can certainly count on that inside Lucas Oil Stadium. You can also count on big news from Combine Week. Let's start in Cincinnati, although it was in Indy. Duke Tobin, who is their acting GM of sorts, who has been there for a very, very long time, addressed the offseason plans for Cincinnati. We have heard from the Bengals. Their indication is they want to pay everybody. They want to keep T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson and Jamar Chase all happy, paid, and in-house. And they laid out how exactly they would do that, including DRS, making Jamar Chase, after a Triple Crown season, the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Donnie, I think it's fair to say you've been critical of the Bengals' agenda when it comes to finances in off seasons past. Do you believe this year they'll fork up the money?
Let's use analogies here, which I like to use. Back maybe a decade ago, you could have bought Bitcoin for like $1 a Bitcoin, right? And let's just say somebody told you, hey, look, I think this is the next great thing here in the crypto market. Even if you don't understand it, go out and buy yourself 10 or 20 of these things. You just hold on to it for about 15 years. Ooh, what a great investment that was, because Bitcoin is selling between 75,000 to 100,000, whatever it might be. You say, well, Donnie, where are you going with this? Hear me out on the Cincinnati Bengals. What if I would have told you, which I did a year and a half ago, hey, you know, it's a great investment. We know the cap's going up. Damn, we got such a good wide receiver that we drafted in this organization named T. Higgins. We need to make him part of our future. Nona goes, nah, let's wait on this one. All right, let's fast forward again. Boy, Jamar Chase might be the best wide receiver in football. We got a chance to sign him before he can actually get to those free agent years. It's going to save us a lot of money and wrap him up as a core piece of our future. And the Brown family goes, I think we should wait on one. Or how about Joe Burrow? Let's hold off a little bit and say, you know what? We could probably save a little bit of money, but no, let's hold off because we have to pay more money than any quarterback is going to make on the open market here. Do you see where I'm going with this? It's great that your general manager, player, director of personnel, whatever it might be, is saying, we'd love to sign these guys. Maybe the stupidest game plan we've ever seen of how you're supposed to tie up your core guys. You're supposed to come to them before they actually have a chance to get close to free agency and say, we know how good you are. We're going to pay you not market rate, but close to it here so we can extend you for 6 to 7 years and everybody's happy and we go on winning. Not wait till the last minute when the prices are absolutely skyrocketing to then start saying, sure, let's pay Jamar Chase more money than any wide receiver non-quarterback has ever got. And then T. Higgins goes, all right, cool. Make me the second most now at this point. Like, oh, how did we get to that point? Because you didn't sign the guy, you idiots in Cincinnati.
Yes, incredibly idiotic, because what Duke Tobin just said is idiotic. Last year, Jamar Chase was entering his 4th year of his NFL career. On your rookie contract, when you're a first-round pick, it is a 5-year deal, 4-year deal with a 5th-year team option that the team needs to indicate entering your 4th season if they are going to pick up. Of course, since he said we are going to pick up Jamar Chase. So you know you have him under contract for 2 years. You could have made him, if you did this shrewdly and with some anticipation, the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history before the Vikings paid Justin Jefferson, allowed Minnesota to set market value, and you could have had Jamar Chase balanced out with the largest contract at the time over the final 2 years of his discounted rookie deal. Instead, you had a pissed-off Jamar Chase who went out there and said, you're going to have to pay me now, with a Triple Crown season, leading the NFL in receptions, 127, receiving yards, 1,708, and receiving touchdowns at 17. So now you're going to have to pay Jamar Chase. T. Higgins, as Donnie said, is going to say, well, then you got to make me the second highest paid or at least top 5. So now you're going to need to fork over a ton of money there. And then Trey Hendrickson, who just led the NFL in sacks and finished runner-up in Defensive Player of the Year, is going to be like, and where exactly is my money? And Jermaine Pratt, who has been the defensive leader for 6 years, who has also sneakily requested a trade, is going to be like, okay, so like, where is my money? And you paid Joe Burrow at the time to make him the highest paid quarterback in the history of the NFL. It is idiotic. If Donnie and I can have these conversations as sports talk show hosts on a Wednesday morning, then you better believe there should be people in the front office in Cincy that had these conversations 3 years ago.
Exactly. And that's the whole crux of the argument. It's like sometimes the fans and people outside the organization understand better what the organization is trying to do. But once again, the NFL is one of the only institutions where you can run your team into the ground. You be as cheap as you want. You will always be profitable no matter what product that you put out on the field. Would anybody have faulted? Like, honestly, if Cincinnati came out last year and was like, you know what? We can't afford both of these wideouts. We're probably going to trade Jamar Chase. And the fans will be upset and they go, look, we're going to get 2 first-rounders. We'll draft another wide receiver high. Hopefully it works out. We can try again at this. But the fact of the matter is, this team didn't make the playoffs last year. And you already have the highest paid quarterback in football. And then you're going to say, we're going to possibly reset the market at wide receiver and also at defensive end. Understanding that your defense was epically bad last year. And you say, okay, what are we missing? A lot of pieces. We're going to triple the salary for our defensive end and then still try to go out and hire pieces to add to the defense at linebacker in the secondary. Then on offense, boy, we could use some offensive linemen here. No, we're resetting the market at multi. You can't run an organization like this. And also, it's not as if there's no salary cap and you go like, they have the richest owner in sports. He will figure it out. They have the cheapest owner in sports that's now trying to wrap his head around. Do you remember, like, I'm never going to change the name of my stadium, even though I can get $25 or $30 million a year because my dad's name is on the stadium. And then Joe Burrow goes like, you're going to have to pay me. They go, oh, sorry, Dad, sold out the pay core. So I don't know what they're going to sell off now just to try to avoid, to try to get Higgins and or Chase. It's just bad all the way. It didn't have to be this way is the point Ben and I are trying to make.
For sure. And Donnie, there are some NFL franchises run by ownership groups that are completely tied to said NFL franchise. The Hallison-McCaskey family, of course, in Chicago. The Brown family now for the Bengals. Mike Brown wasn't a successful businessman that had billions of dollars and said to himself in 1992, let me buy the Bengals. His father founded the organization and handed it to him. That's not necessarily the best recipe for success or maybe the most shrewd financial wizard that you will see. And now Cincy needs to negotiate all of this to get the right deals in place. Donnie, on Super Bowl week, Travis Kelce told everybody, I'm fired up. I still got a lot of legs left in this football life. I'm coming back. And then the Chiefs lost in their pursuit for history in winning 3 consecutive Lombardi trophies. And then on his podcast with his brother Jason, said, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to kick the can down the road and really reflect on my career and this season. Yesterday, KC's GM Brett Veach telling reporters in Indianapolis, we expect Travis Kelce to return and be fired up to play football in 2025. Do you think he will?
Yes, and I do think that they're back channeling each other at this point by saying, you know what, I'm reaching out to the agent, to the player. What are the vibes here? Like, you know what, he's probably 50-50. We're looking to come back. And, of course, Veach isn't going to go up there and be like, you know what, we're in salary cap purgatory. I actually hope he doesn't come back next year. They're never going to say that. You want your superstars back in the fold. It's better for your team, and they hope he comes back invigorated for another season in 2025.
More NFL headlines from Indianapolis. Up next on the Early Line.
The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
So many NFL headlines from Indianapolis during Combine Week around the National Football League. DRS, we continue to dive through the biggest of them, and we'll reflect to plenty. The Cleveland Browns general manager, Andrew Berry, saying yesterday, despite his superstar defensive lineman and pass rusher Myles Garrett demanding a trade this offseason, the Browns have no intention of actually granting that request in trading Garrett. I don't know exactly if that is going to be what happens at the end, if it is just posturing at this moment, But Andrew Berry saying the Browns are not dealing Myles Garrett at this time.
Yeah, and I guess you have to say that because there's a long time that you could sort of mend fences and come to an agreement because nobody wants to get rid of one of the best, if not the best defensive ends in football. That's a premium position and a guy right in the middle of his prime you could use, but also using him for what is the question for Cleveland. No idea who their quarterback's going to be next year, playing in one of the toughest divisions in football. So are you more happy to say, sure, we'll pay a premium price for this defensive end and get actually no ROI back out of it in the way of wins and or playoff wins at this point? Because that's the way I view it here. If you are Cleveland, for me, you hate to trade away great players, but if it's going to get you or net you, let's just say a first-round pick, a starter, and a second and a third, you should make that move because, number one, you clear up cap space. Number two, you're not good enough to actually use that player for what he's designed to do, wreck the quarterback in the fourth quarter because you're not winning many games in the fourth quarter. It makes sense to me. I don't have any issue with the actual GM saying this because I'm sure he wants to have Myles Garrett back, and you're not going to lead off a conversation on, yep, just talk to Myles. He wants out. We agree. Like, that's not going to happen. But also understand this. Smokescreen season, which we're right in the middle of right now, starting in Combine Week, whether or not the general manager says we want to trade him or not, is not driving the price higher for Myles Garrett. If they both agree he should be gone, you're still going to get a king's ransom either way. Yeah. You don't have to play that, well, we don't want to trade him, but give me a call on the bat line here. Let's make a deal.
I think those are the more important questions, DRS. Not a matter of if, but when, first and foremost, and how much do the Browns get in return? They hold the second overall draft pick. They need to recoup a ton of draft capital that they gave up to get Deshaun Watson in that worst trade and worst deal we have ever seen in the history of the NFL. Speaking of good deals and good contract extensions, Khalil Shakir signing that with Buffalo. 4-year deal worth just a little bit more than $60 million. Not a lot to pay for who was the top target this year in Buffalo. Of course, DRS, that was the question for the Bills. Who would be that lead guy now for Josh Allen after parting ways with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis? It was Shakir this season in 2024.
Yeah, and somebody's got to step up on the outside for this team. A very good slot receiver, and you suited him on a game-to-game basis. He's the most trusted target for Josh Allen. Reward the guy. They did that. It's a good move for the Buffalo Bills. They have to just keep on adding on offense here, which might include just addition by keeping some of your same players happy, like their running back who wants big-time money out there this year.
Career year for Khalil Shakir in every aspect, the most receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns in his 3 years in the National Football League. Just a couple of other headlines, DRS, that I wanted to make sure you saw yesterday. Did you see Indianapolis at home said they are going to create a quarterback competition that will be fierce for Anthony Richardson this offseason, and yet they don't have the other quarterback that's going to compete with AR under contract on the roster just yet.
Yeah, we're not handling this very well because it was apparent last year, like, brother, you don't even practice or study film. I have to bench you here. We'll make up an excuse. Hopefully he got his act together, which he did for a couple weeks. And they said, boy, he's really still inaccurate. And he said, well, how can we come up in the offseason? We want him to be our starter. Let's put a charade on it because we are going to get you the best competition while not getting you any competition. But hopefully you take our threat seriously and you work out extremely hard in the offseason, come prepared for OTAs, training camp, and the regular season. We understand one thing. This is going to end poorly in Indianapolis. I understand you took a guy with a lot of raw talent and tried to mold him. Steichen is a very good coach. It just didn't work. You're not just going to snap out of it and become a 75%, accuracy rate here and handle your business on the football field. Sometimes you just have to admit your mistake and move on, Indy, not compound that decision, which it looks like they're going to compound that decision.
Sometimes the danger of the combine can be seeing Anthony Richardson at 6'5", 245 be an absolute athletic freak and set every record for a quarterback during the combine in what he does athletically, and not making sure that you realize in his only full year as a starter in college, he had a completion percentage of 53.8%. That doesn't often get better at the next level, but not a good sign for Anthony Richardson, unfortunately, when you are in a quarterback competition against a quarterback to be named later. Speaking of quarterbacks in different situations around the NFL, Terry Fontenot, the GM of the Atlanta Falcons, saying Atlanta is more than comfortable, DRS, to have Kirk Cousins as the most expensive backup the NFL has ever seen.
Like usually you say like, oh, he's just saying that to get him traded. But I actually think that Atlanta is so poorly run. Like that is the actual decision being made in the bill. Like, yeah, we got a good backup quarterback. We'll make about $35 million. And if we don't use him, remember the old philosophy of, why did you draft Michael Penix here and you signed Kirk Cousins? Like, look, if Penix never plays for us, that means it was an unbelievably good decision because Kirk Cousins is that good. Like, that doesn't make any sense. How about if you got him another weapon to use if you think that quarterback is going to be good? So now you're saying, well, if Kirk Cousins makes $35 million and never sees the field, that means Penix is really good. That's not the point, Atlanta. I don't know who's running the ship down there, but my goodness, seems like an anchor pulling you underwater right now. Of course you can't have Kirk Cousins at $30+ million as your backup. Come on.
None of it made sense. Even the best case scenario of Kirk Cousins being good for 2 years and the Falcons win the NFC South and make the postseason, and then you turn it over to Michael Penix Jr. for his third NFL season at the age of 26 to see if you're going to pick up his fourth-year option. Even that best case scenario was still incredibly dumb. Oh, well, we drafted Penix. He looks pretty good, and now he's going to be our starter. Yeah, you're going to owe Kirk Cousins $40 million even if you trade the guy. 37.5 if that deal happens after June 1st. Also, some confusion around Kirk Cousins' injury status from Week 10 on yesterday. Doesn't seem to be a very seamless situation in the A. Clay Kubiak, new offensive coordinator in San Francisco, taking the official reins from Kyle Shanahan. A lot of names there. Mick Lombardi, a part of the staff. John Lynch's kid, a defensive assistant. A lot of NFL legacies up there by the Bay. We'll hear from Mike Borgonzi and Joe Shane about their draft plans for the Titans and Giants, respectively, up next.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Road management is a dirty word.
Let him rip. You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Plenty of NFL headlines from around Indianapolis during NFL Combine Week, and not just about the prospects, but really the general managers that are there in Indy sharing their draft plans and what they have ahead this offseason, including new GM in Tennessee, Mike Borgonzi, about what the Titans are planning to do, DRS, with that number 1 overall pick. Let's hear from Borgonzi yesterday.
Anytime you have number 1 pick, it's always going to be a topic of conversation. Yeah.
Has it gotten to a point where, a lot of other teams are getting very nosy, so to speak?
I would say we've had some phone calls. Yeah. I'll keep those phone calls to the vest, but we've had some phone calls, yeah.
You found your generational talent as you've gone through the draft season.
Listen, there's a handful of players, anytime at the top of the draft that you would deem generational talents. And we certainly feel that way this year as well.
Kind of going back on his initial comments from his introductory presser, where Borgonzi said we are not going to pass up on a, quote, generational talent with the first overall pick. He didn't say quarterback. Could he have meant a generational game wrecker like Penn State's Abdul Carter, the two-way elite superstar and the Heisman Trophy winner, and Travis Hunter? We shall see. Donnie, last week we looked at the odds courtesy of our Canadian partners on the FanDuel Sportsbook of the team they expect to make that first overall selection, and it still remains the Titans as an odds-on favorite at minus 360.
You need a quarterback. There's a really good quarterback out there. His name is Cam Ward. You draft the number 1 overall. You try to make it work. You add some, pieces to the puzzle with wide receiver and linemen and defense. That's the way it's supposed to go. I never agree with, hey, you know what? Let's pass the buck. We'll trade out of 1. We'll trade back to 10. We'll get an offensive lineman. We'll try again next year. Maybe win too many games, 6 or 7, so we can't draft the quarterback. You're there for a reason because you're extremely poor at the quarterback position. There are good quarterbacks. You take the quarterback and you move forward. And also, it's got to be a tough job for a GM because you have to say nothing here. Like, I would almost get to the point if I was like, we settled on Cam Ward and shock the headlines, lead ESPN the next day, today we're looking more at Shedeur Sanders just to have some fun. But you saw he was answering those questions. Hey, man, is anybody calling you? Of course they're calling him. Which teams are? I can't tell you that. Do you want to draft a quarterback? We're looking at him. How about a game record? We're looking at him too. Do you see what I mean? It's such a tough spot where you're going to have to answer questions and you can't answer any of them. Just answer them open-ended all the way through. But the one thing I do know they should not be trading out of the number 1 overall pick. Pick your quarterback. You have the pick of the litter. Whatever guy you go with, have confidence and move forward as an organization.
The Titans desperately need a quarterback. Thus, you would think it would make perfect sense for that to be Miami's Cam Ward or even Shedeur Sanders if they liked what he brought to the table more. Cam Ward, even a stronger favorite now to go first overall at minus 155. This 2025 class of QBs not seen, Donnie, as the strongest quarterback class in the last half decade. 3 of the last 4 drafts, we have had a generational type touted talent. Trevor Lawrence in 2021, Bryce Young / maybe even CJ Stroud in 2023, and of course Caleb Williams a season ago. Not exactly that, which has led to some speculation around that first overall pick. But you could easily say the Titans need a quarterback at 1. The Browns are in desperate need of a quarterback at 2. So are the Giants at 3, but there might not be a QB worth drafting in that spot. Here's New York's GM, Joe Shane, on what the Giants' draft philosophy is going to be.
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do on that. This is a great opportunity for us, obviously, in Indy, first time to get around some of the prospects and, have conversations with them, first time meeting them. So we've got a lot of work to do on, the number 3 pick. We've done a lot of work throughout the fall on the college prospects, but this phase of the calendar is, getting to know who they are as people, what the fit's going to be, and then obviously free agencies before the draft. So 2 weeks from now, the roster will look different. So we know we have an idea of, 3 to 5 players, 6 players, 7, whatever it may be, and move back scenarios. You can do that. We'll also look at, moving up if that's a possibility. So it's an exciting time for, a year for us and, a chance to make some change on the roster. And so we'll look at all different, scenarios.
As for most GMs, they don't say a whole heck of a lot. Joe Shane certainly does. Some of that was the behind-the-scenes camera look during off-season Hard Knocks, but just pretty much spelled out all in every single possibility the Giants are undertaking this offseason.
Exactly, and it's all going wrong because they won a game late in the season where they possibly should be drafting number 1 overall and hold all of the cards. For me, the Giants, he said the key word, trade back. Abdul Carter is a fantastic football player, but look at the roster there. They signed a high-priced guy who they traded for last year in Burns, and then Thibodeau on the opposite side. It's almost like they shouldn't even use him as like an embarrassment of riches. Maybe go with Travis Hunter, but they need a quarterback, and they're not in position right now to get a quarterback. Disaster class by the Giants front office this year.
Let's get you ready for March. NCAA tournament looks next.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the two best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on this Wednesday on the Early Line on SportsGrid. He is Donnie. I am Ben. We are just a few days away from the month of March. That is Saturday. Only 3 days remain. About 2 weeks left of our college basketball regular season at the high major level. This Sunday, conference tournaments start in one of the greatest weeks that you will see. Really, 2 weeks, first at the mid-major level. Everybody trying to punch that ticket to the big dance through an automatic berth. And then at the high major level in conference tourneys, trying to solidify your seed line or your position in the NCAA tournament. Donnie, today we're going to go conference by conference. Look at some of the odds to reach a Final Four, to win a national championship, and ask some big picture questions. Let's start in the Big Ten. According to Joe Lunardi's bracketology yesterday, the Big Ten Conference had 10 teams into the Big Dance. Of course, one of the things that has plagued the Big Ten in the last 2.5 decades is the Big Ten as a whole has not won a national championship with a Big Ten team currently in the league since Michigan State and Tom Izzo did so way back in the year 2000. The Spartans, as of this moment, have the best price for a Big Ten team to reach the Final Four at plus 850. Best number to win a national championship as well at 40-1. A lot to be decided, DRS, and who that top seed is in the Big Ten tournament. But the big question to you, who should be the favorite of the Big Ten tournament? Perhaps who has the best outlook to make a deep run come March?
I mean, it's probably going to be Michigan State, as you see, is the favorite there, but also the graphic is kind of skewed. Like, you say, okay, to make the Final Four, Michigan State is plus 850, but Wisconsin is 9-1. But if they want to win it, one team is plus 850, and then also Wisconsin is 45-1. Like, it doesn't, like, the graphic itself isn't really explaining the overall totality of that conference. I'm not sure if that's actually the correct. Is that the correct pricing right there?
I think we had a misprint. Plus 850 for Michigan State to get to the Final Four. A 40-1 number on Sparty to win a national championship. So I think it could have just been a slight miscue there, but we'll clear that up. So, plus 850 for MSU to get to the Final Four, shortest number. 40-1 price to cut down the nets as a national champ, also shortest number out of the Big Ten.
Yes, and also when you're lining it up, too, if you're just going with like some KenPom numbers, usually you want to have that perfect mix. You got to be able to play really good defense. We understand that. You need a head coach who typically has a pedigree in winning in March. Now, it's been a while, as you explained, for Michigan State, but I do think they're the best team. So offense, if it fails in one game, you can rely on defense. If your defense isn't playing well, you can rely on your offense. So it sort of works hand in hand. But if we're looking for that upshot team that's like, you know what, it's something that we really haven't paid attention to, is probably Wisconsin. Because right now, if you run that offense, that can be the ultimate equalizer. You knock down your three-point shots. It used to be Wisconsin used to make deep runs in the tournament. Why? Because they played really good defense, slowed it down on offense, and were extremely efficient. But we always talk about the margin of victory, or should I say, like the margin of error that you have during a game. If you're limiting possessions here and not the ability to go into the mid to high 70s on a game-to-game basis, oh, no, look, you're in a battle every single night. Wisconsin's offense has actually turned it on to be the best offense in the Big Ten, and that could be something. But for me, you're trusting pedigree at this moment right now, and Michigan State, offensively and defensively, the best team in the Big Ten for me, Ben.
Not your father's Wisconsin offense, 88 points last night against Washington. Make that 16 games of 80-plus this year for the Badgers, the most they have ever recorded in a single season in school history. I have a Final Four bet on Wisconsin. I have a Big Ten regular season championship bet on Michigan State. And I do believe, DRS, based on the analytical numbers, Maryland might be the best suited team to make a deep run in March out of the Big Ten. The Crab Five, as they are known. Jacoby Gillespie, Selton Miguel, Rodney Rice, Derek Queen, the outstanding freshman, and Julian Reese. They pretty much have all of the production for Kevin Willard and the Terps. Huge game tonight, by the way. Top 20 tilt in College Park as Maryland, 3.5-point home favorite, plays host to Michigan State. Purdue made a run to the Final Four and a national championship game last year. First bid to the Final Four for the Boilers in more than 4 decades since 1980. They have looked good at times, and Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn still playing great basketball. Not a ton of depth for Purdue this season. Michigan, an intriguing team. 14 games, DRS, this year decided by 5 points or fewer. 10-4 straight up in those games. You wonder, when you have won so many games and played in so many games featuring a close margin, if that is a benefit for the tight games that you can expect in the madness come the NCAA tournament, or if your luck perhaps starts to run out. How do you evaluate the Wolverines right now?
I like the Wolverines. I do. And also, it's a good question you ask, because the close games, yes, they do matter. We talk about it much more typically in football. Like, hey, they're used to winning and pulling out close games in the fourth quarter, a.k.a. the Kansas City Chiefs on their way to another Super Bowl appearance. Boy, how do they get it done? They don't panic in the biggest moments. And that's key. That means you call a timeout, your coach calms the waters down, has the perfect play call, and you guys able to go out and execute in the biggest moments. But also when you talk about that with a Michigan team, top 60 in the country here in adjusted tempo. And I like that, because that means you're used to playing that style, but also if you have to get your shots off, you can run away with basketball games. Not using the old Virginia, let's just say, we're going to go really slow, and no matter what's going to happen, it's going to be a 4-point game with a minute to go, but we're used to that. You don't want that. That can be like the exception to the rule, but it doesn't have to be the rule of law at that point. If you have the ability to use your offense and get up outside in tempo and blow a team off the court, advantage yours in March Madness here. You don't always have to slow it down, play great defense, and hope you make your shots over the final 5 minutes or get to the free throw line. That's why I like Michigan. They do play with some tempo, and that can help them out because, again, it doesn't always have to be close.
The SEC is going to have the most teams from a single conference into the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about basketball's best conference this year to start off hour number 3. The Big Ten more than likely will be the only other league to have double-digit bids to the big dance, or at least the second most. 8 teams really solidified. The 5 on that graphic, UCLA, Illinois, and Oregon. There's about 3 teams, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Indiana, trying to be on the right side of the bubble to see the madness in March. And just to say, the overall outlook for the Big Ten, really not great this year, DRS, in terms of winning a national championship. Michigan State, shortest price, 40-1, 13th best around the nation. That 45-1 price on Wisconsin, 15th best. The only 2 teams out of the Big Ten inside the 15 best numbers to win a national championship. Let's go from the Big Ten to the Big 12, where Houston has the 3rd best number to win a national championship and just won the Big 12 for a 2nd consecutive year. Both of the seasons the Cougs have been in this conference. A plus 140 price to reach the Final Four as well. You have an Iowa State team that, healthy, can be dangerous. Arizona and Tommy Lloyd can always make some noise in the big dance. Texas Tech looks to be incredibly balanced, and Grant McCaslin has done wonders this year in Lubbock. And, of course, the staple of March success within the Big 12, that would be Kansas. A 65-1 price now on the Jayhawks to win a national championship for the preseason number 1 team in the country. Big question about the Big 12. Donnie, does Kansas have the 2nd highest ceiling from teams out of the Big 12 this year in the tournament?
I don't know if they do, because it's hard to take out what those preseason rankings were, but also understand this. You talk about CLV on your ticket and you take Kansas to start the season, or you take Kansas now. Of course, it's a much different price and a great price point. And also understand this, Kansas in the top 10 in the country in defensive rating. You know that is so key when you go on the road and play those, neutral court environments and those giant stadium types where you have a guy down low, Hunter Dickinson, that can control the paint, get the rebounds, and you can run your offense through. That is a major advantage. But also understand this. We talk a lot about the best team in that conference, and rightfully so. It's 16-1. That's Houston. 8th overall in offensive rating, 3rd overall in defensive rating. But the metric that might do you in there, 360th in adjusted tempo, which means you're not using your style play as a cream of the crop. More possessions, the better, because we're better than you. That might get them in trouble. We're not saying it will. It just could.
We'll continue the conversation next.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And, of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor. But you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
We know the Knicks are talented. They're 37-20. It's not a bad season by any stretch. We're just not beating the upper echelon team.
This is the Knicks team right now. They're a very good team. And I'm a Knicks fan. You can't look at there and say, this team can win a championship. They're not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. Are we the New York Knicks or are we the New York Fugazis? Just forget about it.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the 2 best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four, because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid. The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
we continue to have that updated outlook for the madness in the month of March in the NCAA tournament, going conference by conference. DRS in the Big 12, there is no doubt that Houston is the league's best shot of winning a national championship. Third best price to reach the Final Four, third best number to win a national title. And Houston certainly looks the part right now after clinching their second consecutive Big 12 regular season crown on Monday night with a road win in Lubbock. 13 consecutive road victories for the Cougs, the nation's longest active streak. We asked about Kansas. Do they have the second highest ceiling? I don't think it's even close. The odds makers telling you that as well. I would take Iowa State and Texas Tech before KU. Heck, I might take some teams like BYU before I would take KU, and not just because BYU absolutely blew out Kansas last week in Provo. The Jayhawks have been an interesting team. They won the national championship in 2022. They have been ousted without getting to the second weekend 4 of the other 5 NCAA tournaments, 4 of the 5 years, including that year winning a national championship. And that's not the standard, of course, in Lawrence, where in the 12 years prior to the last half decade that I mentioned, they had at least reached the Sweet 16 in 9 of 12 years. I'm not so sure Kansas has the makeup this season to be a second weekend team. How many out of the ACC will? Because, Donnie, the last few years, there's been a conversation around what was once the basketball power about the decline of this league. Not as many good teams, not as many teams getting to the NCAA tournament. And yet, when you look at the last few years, so many teams making deep runs. Even an NC State team as an 11 seed that only got to the big dance because they had a couple of great days in the ACC tournament and then continued that March momentum. Might we see the same for the ACC this year? Duke, a minus money price, one of 2 teams in minus money alongside Auburn to reach the Final Four, and the second best price to win a national championship. Duke still a hefty favorite to win the ACC right now, but still getting tested by Clemson and Louisville. As of this moment, Donnie, those are the only 3 surefire teams into the big dance. Wake Forest and UNC really flirting with that bubble position. 4 teams, according to Lenardi yesterday, including Wake Forest as the last team into the bracket as of this moment. North Carolina, the first team out. Big question for the ACC, outside of how many teams will reach the big dance, is Jon Scheyer, like his predecessor and his former head coach, Mike Krzyzewski, ready to lead Duke to a national championship run?
Could be, but also this is not your dad's ACC, as we like to say. In what world would you think back and like, hey, by the way, Ben, let me let you know a secret. Carolina's 11-6 in the ACC. That sounds like a 2 line. That sounds like a 3 at absolute worst. Now we're talking about them not even getting in to the tournament. Why? Because how bad the ACC is, and a lot of bad characters in this conference all the way through. But it is very top heavy. I do think Clemson is a decent program, 14-2 in the ACC. Also with Louisville, 15-2. A lot of fun. Chucky Hepburn there. They got a couple guys that can shoot the 3-point shot. They play with a decent tempo, a fun team to watch, and also very good offensively and defensively. But it just feels like in the ACC, Duke is just a single notch up from the rest of the class. And you said, wait a second, 14-2, 15-2, 16-1. On a night-to-night basis, at the top end and your ceiling, Duke is far away the best team in the ACC. Like, if you're going to put 2 teams and say A games are coming to play here between Duke, Louisville, and Clemson, Duke is probably going to win every single one of those games up against anybody else's perfect game that they can play. The only question is going to be is Scheyer used to making deep runs into the tournament and winning championships? Obviously, the answer is no. Are we taking a look here at Louisville saying, you know what? Last year was a terrible year and the Kenny Payne years are behind us. Can we all of a sudden put that behind us here at 15-2 or what Clemson can do? But for me, there's only one team you're really looking at in the tournament coming up, and it is the Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah, DRS, I would have to agree. I do wonder, though, right? With such a talented freshman core, that's not normally the type of teams that win games matter most in the month of March. But Cooper Flagg is generational. Con Knippel, one of the best shooters that you will find. Kaman Malawach, one of the best bigs in the ACC. And they have some veteran presence around those guys, like a Tyrese Proctor, like a Mason Gillis, who works as a reserve, who was a part of the Purdue team to get to the national championship game a season ago. Malik Brown, when he is healthy for this team as well. Sion James, there's a lot to like about this Duke makeup outside of the outstanding freshman coached by John Shire. We'll see how it all plays out. It is year number 3 under Shire. By far, Duke, the best chance for the ACC. 25-3, top-rated team in KenPom, top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. The Blue Devils are absolutely working teams in the ACC and expected to work teams like last night on the road at Miami as a 23.5-point favorite in winning by 37. Clemson's been a dangerous team in the tournament. I think Brad Brownell is one of the most underrated coaches around the country in college basketball. What Pat Kelsey has done this year in his first year with Louisville has been remarkable. It will be really interesting, Donnie, to see if Wake Forest and North Carolina can get into the big dance. The metrics are not great for either the Demon Deacons nor the Tar Heels, despite the fact that UNC has won 4 straight games. They only have a single quad 1 victory. But Donnie, again, the perceived downward spiral of the ACC, and yet in the last 3 NCAA tournaments, the ACC as a conference has had 4 teams reach the Final Four in total over the last 3 years. That's the most of any league in college basketball.
And money talks, it does. Like UNC in or out is a big deal to the tournament because of the national fan base that they do have, and rightfully so. But if you're just looking at the numbers itself, they deserve to be on the bubble, as you explained. Not very many big wins and just racking up wins against lower level competition in this conference. But if you do look at the top end again, like KenPom's net rating for Duke is 1. And the team in second place right now, just due to victories in conference with Louisville, they're 25th. Like, that is a massive disparity between a 16-1 and a 15-2 conference team where they're letting you show the underlying numbers really favor the Duke Blue Devils. It'll be an interesting ACC tournament because if somebody can knock off Duke here, let's just say if it's Carolina, those are big wins that you can stamp on that resume as you move forward and try to make it into the big dance.
You would think UNC has to do that in the ACC tournament as well. Let's talk the Big East next.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the 2 best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
In college football, there is the Power Four. In college basketball, there is the Power Five, and that includes the Big East. Tonight in Indianapolis, inside Hinkle Fieldhouse, St. John's has an opportunity with a victory against Butler to claim at least a share of a Big East regular season championship for the first time in more than 3 decades. The last year in 1991-92, the Lou Carnesecca era up in Queens, but now it's the Slick Rick era. Rick Pitino in his second season. And DRS in the Big East and out of the conference, St. John's has the best outlook to make a deep run in the Big Dance. But let's not forget, despite a disappointing season thus far based on relative expectations, the 2-time reigning champs also remain in the Big East. That would be UConn. Marquette, big home victory by 30 last night against Providence, trying to settle the waters before they enter postseason action. And Creighton, of course, is going to be a Big East tournament team as well, a tournament team from the Big East. 4 teams based on ESPN's bracketology yesterday from the Big East into the Big Dance, with Xavier a part of the list known as the first 4 out. When you look at the Big East, Donnie, the big question is this: is St. John's a true national championship contender?
I actually think they are. Like, you look at the defensive rating, number 2 overall, it starts there. So typically when you hear that, and the way we've talked about St. John's up until, like, to say the past 2 weeks, is grimy team, going to play great defense, can't shoot their way out of a paper bag, but they're tough, and they got a coach who's been there, done that before. And you say, okay, that might be enough just to make a deep run. But now when you take a look at the analytics here, also adjusted tempo, top 55 in the country, which means we're not moving at a glacier pace, which leaves limited possessions. You're getting out and you're running. And if they, which is a big question mark, but has been answered a little bit over the past week and a half or so, can make the outside shot, including the three-point shot, why can't they?
Yeah.
Like, is the conference in the Big East what it was in the 1980s and early 1990s? No, it's not. They do still have some pretty good opponents there, Connecticut, Marquette, and Creighton. But St. John's, by far, to me, is the clear winner here because, number one, their offense is just starting to come together at the right time. They're always going to play defense. And as I told you, Rick Pitino was there, and the tempo is just a little bit higher than what you think a St. John's team would have at this point. So why not? So contender meaning, yes, they have a chance to win it. Absolutely, right. I would put St. John's in that category.
Listen, I think contender is a Final Four team, a team that reaches a regional final in the Elite Eight. And I do believe St. John's is the caliber of that team. I do just want to say this, right? It is a tournament known as madness. We see so many chaotic upsets and magical Cinderella runs, like an 11-seeded NC State that got hot at the right time and then became a captivating moment for a nation in college basketball. But often we see the cream rise to the top throughout the NCAA tournament as you go weekend after weekend after weekend. And it might be random, but really it is not when you have trends that date back 10, 15, and 20 years. And the metrics around the Johnnies right now are not those, Donnie, that would often lead to a team that really has success in March. Second most efficient defense, great, but 73rd most efficient offense. That is not the making of a balanced side by the Ken Pom metrics that makes a deep run in the Big Dance. Can they defy that? Sure. But does that mean they are likely to win a national championship as of this moment? Not necessarily. 19 of the last 20 national champions in men's college basketball have been a top 25 efficient offense. St. John's is pretty far from that distinction as of this moment. Donnie, how do you feel about UConn? They have the pedigree, although this team, of course, is very different. That is the case year over year in college basketball. Do you believe Connecticut, once they get into the NCAA tournament, can replicate that March dominance we have seen the last 2 seasons?
No, because the expectations then would be that they can actually make a Final Four and have a chance to win a national championship. I just don't think that's the case. And sometimes you can catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle, but we haven't seen it yet. It wasn't as if it's like, hey, man, that was a tough start. Hurley got a late start in the recruiting process, didn't hit the transfer portal, thought he was going to take the Lakers job. They started out extremely slow. You look at them in a Big East, which, again, isn't a great Big East, basically alternating wins and losses here, not against the best competition. Now, you do have Georgetown, Providence, Marquette, and Seton Hall. That should be a minimum 3-1 out before you get to the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden. But I don't think this feels like a lightning in a bottle team. They're just waiting to get to the big stage because they're bored of the regular season because all they do is win championships. It doesn't feel like that way to me.
It is really different, right? It is still just a tournament where your 35-plus games that you played previously can be discarded. How much is that pedigree worth? Hour number 3 up next.